Morning, good afternoon, good evening, regardless of where you are in the world. I want to thank you for leaning in and tuning in to our next masterclass series for the month of June, which is focused on blockchain. We've had quite a few sessions before, so hopefully you'll go out to our YouTube page or to our gallery that's on our website to look at all of the previous sessions that we had before. Why is this session important today? AI and anything around technology or looking at any type of advanced intelligence is critically important. And today we have none other than Miss SHARUFA Walker. This is going to be an important one because if you think that you've missed the boat, if you think you're too old to understand, to learn, this is going to be a pivotal conversation and also celebrating Juneteenth which is the emancipation. So we're going to emancipate everybody around technology. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Ms. Sharufa Walker, where this session is called From Fashion to Blockchain. She's going to walk through her history and how she's been in the fashion industry and how that pivotal moment where everybody experienced during the pandemic actually challenged her to rethink about technology. So I'm going to turn it over to you for you to unpack and tell everyone about blockchain, your history, your story, and how they too can participate in this digital wave that we're in today.
Oh, thank you so much, Tina. I'm honored to be here. I'm excited to be able to contribute to the mission and the vision that you've already cultivated. And this is exciting, right? Like on Juneteenth, us having this conversation around how this technological tool is contributing to the liberation of us. So, yes, let's get right into it. Okay. So, as Tina had already mentioned, my name is Sharufa Rashid Walker. I am the CEO and co founder of Welcome Home, which is a blockchain real estate startup that empowers marginalized communities to own real world assets on the African continent. And aside from being the CEO and co founder of this venture, I am also a two-time founder, where previously I founded my own women's wear apparel line called Janaki, and it was based on contemporary designs for the modern woman. And also, there is an aspect of my journey where I have been able to develop and coin myself as an executive brand architect. And in that facet of business, I'm assisting small to medium size enterprises, founders with business redefining, development, consulting, and essentially helping them to launch, execute, and thrive. I believe and I advocate dearly for the economic equity for us, Black wealth, liberation, and creative transformation. And I'm based in New York, but it's all about how do we create these global bridges from New York to Senegal through tech, through fashion, through legacy. So let's just start from the beginning. My apparel company, Janaki, was born out of love for fashion, travel, culture, fabric, and accessory identity. And what's really interesting, as I was creating this course, one of the things that I've realized is that I've been on a journey of continuous pivots because out of Janaki, it came from a place where I was actually in corporate America. I'm a graduate of Howard University, and post graduation, I ended up doing a bit of traveling in Europe, but then I found myself in New York working within finance. And so I'm working in corporate America, and I'm not really resonating with the community there or the systems that I was working inside of. And so from there, I wanted to be able to really allow myself to explore what's next. There's something else that was burning inside of me, and I knew that I needed to like expound on my inspiration and my creativity. And so I did a bit of introspective self reflection, went on a sojourn where I was able to essentially birth this company. And so it's born out of the love of that travel and also that self understanding and reflection and recognizing that I am an African woman from the diaspora, deeply connected to the culture. So some of the great things about Janaki is that I launched that company in 2020 in 2012, and it was initially self-funded, right? And so traveling the road of entrepreneurship, I essentially just started with myself. You know, I had the vision and I needed to be able to put something out there. And so I remember my first actual showcase was something that I really leaned into my community, leaned into my family to pull it off, and it was a success. And based off of that traction that I had with the brand and having somewhat of public exposure as far as visibility, it then landed me into a great relationship with a great mentor that I had that initially became my first angel investor in the company. So I was blessed for that. And I'm super honored and grateful, you know, that aligned, and it was an integral part of my journey. So with Janaki, it's a company that I designed, manufactured, and created a supply chain, producing collections using African textiles for the modern woman. This brand has been featured in HBO, in CNN, in Essence, in Macy's, along with a lot of A-list celebrities, Taraji P. Henson, Amanda Seales, the list goes on, right? I was able to build a loyal brand following, a direct to consumer audience, as well as global B2B pipelines. So I participated in a lot of trade shows with the company and outside markets, whether it was the Caribbean, whether it was Europe. I knew that this was a brand that resonated with women everywhere. And I wanted to make sure that I got it in the hands of women everywhere. So, what are some lessons that I learned from Janaki? One of the key things is that I learned that you build from what you know. Start with your story, and that is ultimately your secret sauce. I literally was living in Nice in the south of France, taking these sewing classes. I remember my teacher, it was this French woman. Her name was Lily, and I'm learning how to be able to sew on a machine. Previously, I only was doing freehand pattern creation. And at this time, I got more of the mechanisms behind the actual craft and skill. And it was there that literally I was able to start to bring all of these ideas to life. And my point of view was something very special because at this time I was collecting fabrics. I was very inspired about my around my surroundings, and I was inspired about the possibilities of what type of woman I wanted to be able to dress. So I understood that the brand was all about emotion. It wasn't just about the products. I used to think about like, how do I want women to feel when they're wearing my garments? I want them to be able to shop their closet and see a Janaki piece and know that they could constantly pull from it, and that piece would be able to bring them that guaranteed satisfaction. Because Janaki, the name, means self confident and proud. And that was one of the things that I wanted women to feel as they were wearing my garments. And I've also learned that from that company, I needed to be resourceful, I needed to collaborate, I had to stay authentic. I was creating garments out of textiles that were indigenous to the continent. And it was a textile that I remember going to a lot of big box retailers that felt like it was way too niche and they didn't understand how to be able to market it. And they wanted me to dilute the brand. They asked me to stay away from prints. They wanted me to stay more neutral to solid colors. And they made all of these recommendations that didn't feel authentic to me because I knew that there were women, there was an audience, there was product market fit for people who wanted to be able to shine, and wear these clothings in a way that represented their heritage, who they were, and how they felt. And so, being in New York, this is a city that doesn't sleep. And I believe about, the ability to be able to cultivate your dreams and really tap into the possibilities here are endless. And so I really had to learn how to collaborate, how to seek out other people that I needed to be able to lean into, from graphic designers, photographers, um, a plethora of people that are involved in the creative process when you're bringing something to life. And as a creative, as an entrepreneur, I had to recognize that constantly being on the go, constantly working your business, your vision, 24/7, it can lead to burnout. And it was very real. And I had to be able to listen to my body, listen to what was happening, and allow myself to rest, because a part of being creative, a part of being able to birth something into existence, is understanding what your boundaries are. And resting is a part of creating. So that allowed me to learn when it was time to evolve. So let's enter the pivot. 2020, unfortunately, we understand what happened. The pandemic hit, the world stopped. It was a very, very difficult time. And for me specifically, being in New York at the epicenter here in the US, it was extremely difficult. I was in a position where I was actually on my way headed to East Africa for an R&D trip to be able to make the collection of my dreams. And at the time when we got shut down, it really disrupted everything. It disrupted that trip. It disrupted my manufacturing supply chain that I had already established, and I worked really, really hard to acquire it here in New York. And I really had to understand, like, life was going to be different from this point on. And so for me, it was something that I wanted to be able to contribute to the community, to the cause. So I started to create masks and PPE for first responders. But there was a point afterwards where I had to think about, well, what else am I doing to try to stay relevant as a company and as a business? And that was the first time that I've ever been involved or experienced something to that magnitude when it comes to the pandemic. And I realized, like, it didn't resonate to try to push or promote fashion anymore at that time. The world is grieving. I needed to stop. And so that's exactly what I did. I paused the business. I said, there was a point where I thought about, oh, maybe I do loungewear, like everyone's staying at home. But I said, that's not me. That's not me. Ethically, I didn't feel like it was necessary to continuously promote this overconsumption of goods during a time of grief. So from New York, I traveled to Miami. I feel like that was a haven for a lot of us New Yorkers, just to be able to get out, touch some grass, and to be able to breathe different air. And at that time, I really went through a transformation where I understood for myself that I am the architect of my existence. All of the knowledge, the skills, the gift, the wisdoms that I acquired as I was growing and building Janaki, I could apply that in other ways. And I really started to think about this and come up with new creative pipelines that I could see this into existence. And so, one of the things was for me to be able to talk to potential clients about what their needs were, where they were in their business. If they were just starting out, if they already have been established, what were their goals and what were they looking forward to be able to integrate. And from there, I was able to, like, start acquiring my own clients, helping them out with bringing their visions to life. Whether that was a brand refresh, whether that was business development. There were a lot of things that I was able to pull from my own journey building this company before, and assist others on their journey. And so at the same time that I'm, navigating and consulting with others, I'm also learning and spreading myself and opening my wings to other industries. And actually, one of my dear friends, she introduced me to Bitcoin, and she introduced me to this world of crypto. And I had no idea of its existence prior to this. And I was, of course, fascinated because I understood the utility, and I said, this is a powerful thing to be able to have a permissionless, decentralized currency that is a store of value that will be able to allow you to build wealth in a new way. And so her and we ended up thinking about things a little bit deeper, going into decentralized finance principles. And on the protocol Avalanche, we decided to deploy a node called the Block is Hot. And it was really centered around how do we create a savings mechanism for the community? How do we educate um, the Black and brown people of the world that there's a new way that we can save our dollars and allow those dollars to be compounded and to receive like yields in a way that we had never experienced before. So there was a lot of learning in that. And one of the things after we deployed that node was that we experienced deep highs and deep lows, because what ended up coming up afterwards was the crumble of FTX. And so we got burned during that time, and we learned a lot about, what we did wrong, what we needed to be able to assess and understand, and what we ultimately couldn't control either, right? Because in terms of the risks that are associated with it, it's real, and you have to be able to be prepared in investing in anything and having a clear understanding of what that risk assessment is. But one of the key things in building all of these things is that I realized that the same creativity, the same inspiration that built Janaki could be applied to tech. I started to connect the dots of what was possible, and it really excited me. And it's one of those things to where it's the gift and the curse, right? Like it excited me in a way that I needed to keep going, but I went deep down a rabbit hole, and sometimes, going that deep, you don't know where you're going to land. Um, so, going that deep, I ended up learning about what is blockchain. And essentially, blockchain is a digital record system. It's a transparent, unchangeable Google Sheet. If we're thinking about something that is open source, where anyone at any time in the world can log on and see your transactions and can see like your assets in a way, it tracks who owns what, your land, your money, your assets. You are able to have this public record of when this transaction happened, who did it happen between, from your wallets, and how long or how much the cost was for the transaction to go down. It removes middlemen. It gives the power to you. So now these centralized entities in terms of banks, they're no longer a part of the conversation. This is you having the direct conversation with your money and your wealth accumulation. No longer do you have to pay, the banking fees of this account costs this much in order to hold this many dollars in it, and you need to be able to have a daily ledger of X amount of dollars. It enables a decentralized community ownership and trust. So, in thinking about all of these things and learning about blockchain, and then also from blockchain opening up into the world of Web3, that was the genesis of my company, Welcome Home. During the pandemic, my co-founder, Mamadou Ka, he called me up and he said, "Sister, what you doing?" And I told him, I said, "Well, the pandemic is happening. We're quarantined." And he was like, "Yeah, I think you really need to be able to come out to Senegal, back to the continent, to see what the opportunities are looking like here." We had previously worked together with Janaki when I was sourcing and looking for manufacturing on the continent, and wanted to be able to bring that dream to life. And so, knowing that he transitioned into agriculture, into real estate, he wanted to share what he had been building since then. So, I headed out to Senegal with the intention of just kind of exploring what the opportunity looked like and learning about what the possibility was. And I had every intention, honestly, to be able to purchase something just for myself, for my family, to build a home that they would be able to go and explore the country and the continent that was very near and dear to me. And what I discovered while I was there was that this was something that was bigger than me. This was about us. This was about the culture. This was about liberation and really radically reimagining what is possible when it comes down to ownership, when it comes down to assets, when it comes down to our generational paths in terms of wealth accumulation. And one of the questions that I thought about was, why don't Africans in the diaspora own any real estate assets? Because it was something that for me growing up, I rarely had solid examples of. Statistically, 50% of Africans in the diaspora do not own any real estate assets. And when we talk about lack of growth, we are on the trajectory to be in the net negative. And that is a critical issue. And so while learning about what the real world issue was, and also at learning about blockchain and Web3, I started to my wheels started to turn and I started to think about how can we marry these two? How can this problem be supercharged by the technology? How can blockchain assure someone who's living in the diaspora, away from the asset, that they have full security in going through the transaction of owning and buying on the continent? Because this technology, once again, allows you to be able to communicate in a way that takes a transaction previously, in terms of home ownership or land ownership, land acquisition, and cuts it down from many months to many minutes. And we wanted to be able to offer a solution that allowed people to acquire at a new speed, at a new pace. And what better way to be able to talk to the community but through travel, through a language that we all understand, right? Like we know what it is to be able to go to a new place, whether it's a new city or a new block in your neighborhood, right? Like discovering something new and being able to be inspired or connected to it through its food, through its design, through its architecture. There's so many things that move us as individuals. And this is a universal language. And so when we think about how we wanted to be able to connect the diaspora back to the land that they have these historical roots in, what better way to incentivize them through the community to be able to come back home? And so our goal is very simple, it's fractional land ownership plus luxury travel rewards for our members. And so thinking about this pivot, right? Because that's what we're talking about, from fashion to tech and what carried over. What are the lessons that I was able to learn? I realized that storytelling still matters. The story that I started with Janaki and me going on a sojourn to be able to understand what my creative outlet was within fashion, it was still applicable here in building Welcome Home, because people needed to understand, well, why Senegal, why the diaspora, why this community, and all of those things started at my source. And so having that brand identity was very important, and it still is very important. I needed to understand my audience because essentially that led to the growth of people knowing what is the vision, what is the mission that I'm amplifying. Operations, budgeting, it's still the same, right? You have to think about costs, you have to think about the ROI of what you're putting out and what you're getting back. And it takes a lot of strategy. to be able to come up with some creative solutions on that. But one of the biggest things is that what carried over was that being creative and strategic is my superpower. Because as a creative, sometimes people have a misconception that only one side of the brain is able to activate. But I love the fact that I'm able to really straddle these two worlds and have this duality of having this business acumen as well as coming up with some great creative solutions for traditional or non traditional issues. So, what's changed? I could say a lot. Tech is very fast. Web3 does not sleep. It didn't sleep. It continues 24/7. And I learned that very fast as well. It feels like, a lifetime happens when you look up and it's only been like 2 weeks and you're like, I don't even understand what I just went through. So, keeping up with the pace and recognizing the speed that it's going, the language, the terminology, there was deep learning that I had to go through. Like, what is blockchain? What is a layer one? What is a protocol? What's tokenomics? All of these things were very, very key. And for me to be able to like build a solution that people understood and also to be in conversation with people. But what I also recognized and observed is that sometimes the jargon, the terminology is there as a barrier. It becomes, a wall that people have to climb over in order to access the education. And that's something that I definitely don't subscribe to. And I want to be able to disrupt those types of gatekeepers. And then also the mindset had to shift, right? Before I'm building apparel and I'm building a specific supply chain to be able to ship this product to the consumer, right? And there's a process of what do returns look like, or what do my size runs look like. You're thinking about things when you're developing a product from a processy perspective that requires different skill sets. And now building out a platform, you're onboarding yourself and thinking about different steps. There's process mapping. There are different things from a developer perspective that you have to be able to consider and to inform yourself about in order to know like how to produce and how to move forward to the next step with the platform. So if you think about it almost as a service, it's me moving from a product to a service, which is very different when we're talking about how do we engage with community, how to be able to build it. It requires a lot. And so collaboration was something that I definitely had to learn as well, especially with developers and community builders. Um, I had to be able to immerse myself into this world. So I went to many, many conferences. I went to many events. I mean, I was blessed enough to be here in New York, that there are some strong hubs that have been set up where you can go week after week to be able to engage and learn more. And then from there, I really just started to put myself out there and talk about the mission and the vision, and to be able to learn as I was building, to be able to know who to connect with on the developer side, who was going to be credible enough to build the actual utility. These were big lessons that I had to learn as I'm going through it. So, one of the things when we're talking about the power of the pivot is that you don't need to have all the answers, especially in Web3 and blockchain. As Tina mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we're very early. It's still early on. You're not late at all. There's still so much to be able to be discovered. And just starting, trust and believe, you'll be able to be brought up to speed. And so understand that in terms of subject matter experts, they're still learning as well. And being a part of the conversation is better than being left out of the conversation. So knowing that if you're choosing to pivoting, it's not a failure, it's an alignment. It's taking all of those things that you've been thinking about, that may be housed within you, and you're able to now align them in a way where you can see how does someone with this background in fashion be able to apply her same skills or upskill herself in a way that she can now go to a country, create a business, and then apply this tech stack on top of it. One of the key things is that every industry needs creative minds, storytellers, strategists, and builders. I've learned being in this industry thus far is that my builder profile is non traditional. And I'm okay with that. I actually enjoy that. And I think that that's a part of my superpower. That's my secret sauce, right? Being able to walk into the room knowing that I have a different trajectory or mindset about what the possibilities are in this space versus sometimes people who've just only been tethered to one arena. They have tunnel vision and they're not able to see the power of diversity, right? Diversity of thought. And so this is one thing that I definitely lean into. And lastly, if you know how to build something from nothing, that is your edge. No one gave me the rule book. I think that, in building Janaki out of this place of love, I did not go to FIT. I didn't go to fashion school. I didn't go to business school. But what I did was have a deep belief in self, and I knew that I could learn as I was creating. And so that's one thing. And going through all the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows, it allowed me to get clearer, sharper, and more in tune with what was going to work and what success looked like for me. So here are some tools that have helped me on this journey. Early on in learning about Web3, I really immersed myself into communities. I participated in accelerators. I've definitely gone to different events. Especially in Web3, it's very important to be able to lean into in real life events. And so showing up to conferences, showing up to talks, networking over and over again has been really, really critical. And really immersing myself into communities where other builders, other founders look like me. And so seeking out Black founder circles, seeking out communities within Telegram, within Twitter, they were essential. And then when it comes down to digital tools, no code solutions were critical. Canva, because you're always adjusting a deck or building on something. Figma, and then of course ChatGPT, right? When we're thinking about statistically, how can we pull something quick, and knowing where we need to be able to identify market information. And confidence through clarity was a big thing that has been able to help me because understanding and knowing my why every single time that I walk into a room keeps me in that room because it can become very challenging and very taxing. And that's something that I know that if I lean into that, if I remind myself, if I take that breath, it centers me and it allows me to keep going. So, my question to you all is, what's your pivot? What are you passionate about that solves real problems? How can you use technology? How can you use this open ledger with blockchain to be able to scale your creativity? And the things that you're seeing in your day to day right now, what is something that blockchain can disrupt for you? And what skills do you already currently possess? Do you have to transfer or can be transferable across industries? There's so much upskilling and reskilling that's happening now. And when we think about, the recent jobs report that came out of Davos earlier in the year, one of the things that is going to be very critical in the age of AI and all of this skepticism about what's or how you're going to be replaced is lifelong learners are going to be critical. People who are consistently bettering themselves from an educational perspective, it's going to be literally your backbone of how you're able to succeed and thrive in the next coming decade. So let's just talk about some final takeaways. In owning my story and recognizing my genesis from a designer now into a builder within the scope of tech, I can walk into a room and I know exactly who I am, and I'm appreciative of that. I know that my creativity, my energy is my currency, and I leverage and I understand that tech needs you. It needs your voice, it needs your ideas, it needs your vision. And you don't have to be afraid to start, to shift, or to scale. The pivot is truly your power. And I just want to open it up for questions.
Wow, thank you so much for that. So look, just a couple things, and we do have some questions that's in the chat and several others um, that we will get to. But first off, just a great story. And I wanted to make sure that I had you on to talk about where you started from in understanding technology, but also more importantly, understanding business as well as finance. The community is going to be looking at this. First off, some people they look at blockchain the same as Bitcoin, right? So I want to make sure that we dispel that myth of, well, what's the difference between the two? If that question comes up, and I know it will because I've had that discussion before.
Mm-hmm.
And then from a technology standpoint, just walk people through a blockchain scenario. The fact that you're doing real estate, be able to break that down so people will understand the usability of that utility.
Yeah, sure. So, yes, blockchain and Bitcoin, these are two separate things. When it comes down to Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. And this is a cryptocurrency that can be stored on a blockchain. So, a blockchain is an open source ledger. So, if you think about it like your bank account, right? Your bank account, when you go in and you check your transactions, this is a ledger that the bank has already given you and shown you that yes, you made some deposits, you made some withdrawals. These are the inflows and the outflows in your account. So essentially, blockchain, it is an open source ledger where people are able to come in a protected, secure way and to see what transactions are happening. There is a layer of security from a wallet perspective that allows you to have a cryptic code, where your name is not attached, your identity is not attached, you are anonymous, which allows people to participate who have historically been locked out of banking institutions, right? This is a solution where the unbanked can become banked. So, when we're talking about how to be able to build a blockchain, essentially what you're doing is you're creating a system of computers, right? And they're computers all over the world that are pinging and talking to each other. You have these people who are called miners, and the responsibility of miners are to be able to take these transactions. You coming in and you making a purchase. Let's just use an example, going to the store and buying, a juice, and you're making this purchase. And when you do, the miners are recognizing that you've made a purchase and they're sending it to multiple computers that are verifying that purchase. And then essentially, after it's done, and it's done at light speed, right? Sometimes it can happen in 15 seconds, sometimes it can happen in 30 seconds, right? After that's finished, you will then see a documented transaction on a blockchain that showcases, hey, I made this transaction. All of these computers, all of these miners that are working overtime have verified it. And now it is open and on display for the world to see, right? So that's essentially the difference between crypto, and blockchain. And I like to add, Web3 is essentially the ecosystem where they all live, right? So if we think about the genesis of Web 1 was really about the creation of the internet, right? And
Right.
then we went into Web 2 where you started to see the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples. They started to be able to understand how to monetize the internet, right? And so they went in and said, "Ooh, this data, okay, it's lucrative. All right, I like what we're doing." So they cracked the code that you were able to monetize the internet. But now in Web3, which is decentralized, the power dynamic is shifting. It's going back to the user. It's to say that no, no longer do I want to just freely give my data, my information, my dollars to a Google, to a Facebook, to a Microsoft. I want to be able to own it and decide who I want to engage with. And on top of that, there are ways that I can now leverage this ownership and provide new rewards to myself, new ways to be able to earn money, new ways to think about how can I like create businesses in this aspect. So, in thinking about Welcome Home specifically with real estate, it is a very simple transaction. Um, Traditionally in the US, when someone wants to purchase a house and someone wants to purchase land, you have to work with a local or national liaison, right, in the form of a bank, in the form of a mortgage company, to be able to be vetted and credible to then acquire the asset, right? Like, so this institution decides whether you are credit worthy or investing worthy to be able to gain access to it. What blockchain allows is a complete disruption of that entire system, because especially from the African American community in the US, there's historical biases that have been attached to lack of asset ownership. And so no longer are you um, being, discriminated against because of your race, because of your status. Now you can go directly to the source and you can purchase your home, your land through blockchain that no longer needs to understand or know if you're credit worthy. You're credit worthy because you had the money, right? Like, that's all it needs to know. Do you have enough money to buy the thing?
Right.
Yes, I do. And then you will receive your actual token, right? Which a token is just a digital representation of your asset. That's all that it is. So you
Mhm.
have your solid asset, and now we have this digital representation of it. You own it, it's in your wallet, it's secure because we're dealing with the mining network, right? That continuously secures your assets on chain. And then you continue. It unlocks a lot. I don't want to go too deep because there's so many other
No,
layers of
I
the
think
head. But
no, I
yes.
think this is fantastic. And I wanted people to understand that. And correct me if I'm wrong. So, and this is an example of someone wanting or needing capital to be able to acquire that asset, which is land. You can have your own capital and just buy it outright. And so when we do that, so Sharufa, if you buy that land outright and it's on the blockchain, then the deed for that land, so that means that you owe no one anything other than in the United States, we do have to pay, property taxes, all of that. But that deed and that ownership is located on that blockchain. So that's not disputed. In
Correct.
Africa, you can own that land or it could be bequeathed to you through your family heritage or lineage. It's just that piece of paper or someone telling you
Mm-hmm.
this is a part of that's your historical reference, right? And so what we've seen, a lot of people to go to Africa because the land is cheaper and they just start buying. So
Mm-hmm.
this is to make sure that the land that you have and that you own and has been in your family is now locked because it's on this digital system. Is that
Yes. So, yes to all of that, right?
okay?
One of the things, or a few things that I want to mention. So, for me, in creating this company and creating Welcome Home, I needed to go through the process first to
Mm,
understand what we were actually disrupting. So I had to understand what the pain points are. I purchased land just for myself solely, right? And went through the process of ownership. And you're absolutely right. What I got at the end of the process was a paper ledger. right? And this was very volatile because if we think about what happens when there's a regime change? What happens if there's a natural disaster? What happens, if somebody decides they just don't like Sharufas today? Like it's on a ledger that someone can destroy, and there's no proof or burden to be able to showcase that it existed. And that was a
Yeah.
severe issue that I knew that blockchain could solve for. And when it comes down to um, the process of ownership from the US in relationship to the continent, there are a lot of questions, right? Because I think that we lean into the systems that we've been conditioned to say, like, oh, yeah, they're doing us right. This is what it is. We got to go through these steps. We got to get the lender. We have to go get the appraiser, all of these things that are additional costs when we're thinking about capital that it makes it really hard in terms of a time perspective to be able to plan for, well, when can I get the thing, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes, people are saving up a lifetime to have a down payment, 50,000, 100,000 on a home. Whereas now, when leveraging this technology, the barriers to entry are very low. For Welcome Home, that is why we're focusing on fractional ownership, meaning that you customize your level of comfort for investment. You can start as little as $1,000 to start to be able to acquire the asset, and you can build on top of that. But I think that there's something very powerful when someone can stand on the soil and say, I own this, right? This is mine. And to your point, absolutely, you're able to bequeath it, you're able to gift it. Like, I started to think about how amazing would it be if someone's getting a graduation gift or a birthday present, and no longer
Mhm.
is it the car or the extravagant parties. It's like, hey, here's your deed, here's your digital deed, absolutely, go ahead, you got some land over there waiting on you. Like it shifts our
Yeah,
mindset about
I
what's
love it.
possible. Yeah.
And I always say, soil is to your soul. 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
that's where we come from. And
Mm-hmm.
and just making sure that we have, and we can give that to our, well, it can be a part of our legacy. It's always something important. So look, we have quite a few questions
Ooh.
that's popping up now. I know, I love it. So I'm just going to go down, and if you can come off of mute, and actually, what I say, come out of hiding, to be able to ask your questions, so we can have some live interaction. So I'll start with Carbell.
Um, Good day, Richard. It's nice to meet you. As I was saying, my first question is, how do you think blockchain can help reclaim narratives, can help African creators reclaim their narratives, own their work, and build without relying on traditional gatekeepers?
Mm.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you, Carvel, for that. So, for me, that's essentially what I envision in learning about blockchain to begin with. That this is a pathway to liberation. So, when we're thinking about us creating and us having our own systems, blockchain allows you to do that from the beginning. It's no longer about who do I need to go to in order to be able to make the thing happen. You can make the thing happen now. The power, the information resides in you. And literally, it's at the palm of your hand. So it depends exactly like what you want to be able to build in. But for example, if you're an artist and you want to be able to share your art with the world, whether it's through painting or mixed media, there's a way for you to digitize your work and to put it on a chain where automatically you have ownership rights to it. And here's the great thing is that if you sell it and the person you sell it to decides that they want to resell it, there's a tracking mechanism that you will always get
Yeah.
rewards and income from those sales for a lifetime, because it's all about how do we protect who the true owner of it is. And it gets really deep if you think about like your IP, your intellectual property, ideas that you're just coming up with. And sometimes people don't think about how important it is for us to be able to say, like, no, actually, I was the first one who did it. We see it happen a lot of times in music, where people are in these long, lengthy courtroom battles over who sang the song first or who wrote the lyrics first, right? Now, by leveraging this technology, was like, well, actually, on chain, on this date, at this time, with these chords, where they were documented, and it shows who it was, right? Because whoever was the owner, right, of the wallet or of the keys, then that person is essentially the owner of the actual IP and of the information.
Thank you, Ms. Sharufa. I'm just going to ask the other questions that
I
I
was going
have.
to say, I think you have another question as well, so might
Go
as well.
ahead.
And then Sam, we'll get to you next.
So the other question that I have, you mentioned, with AI coming in and, people having thoughts about it taking over. With you being in the industry of blockchain and, with the creativity side, how do you see AI influencing the future of blockchain and even fashion? And how a follow-up question is, what skills do you think young people who are looking to get into the field should rather focus on to stay ahead in the game and to not, be left behind with AI?
Another great question. One of the things that I know is that there's a lot that is unknown. So when we start talking about AI, when we start talking about quantum computing, and we start talking about the possibilities of a disruption to a blockchain, it's very real. And so I think one of the things that's really important is that you continuously educate yourself on what's happening real time within the industry, because I think that there's a lot that AI will be able to replace, but there's also a lot that it cannot, because at the center of it, there's a need for us to still have that human connection. So I don't think that we'll ever truly replace the need for the uniqueness of the human experience, right? Because I believe that we're spiritual beings, and a machine can't replace that energy. But I think that there are things that we need to really be prepared for, and how our lives are going to be disrupted by it. And also the perception of how it's actually like delivered to us, because I think that there's going to be a warped reality where sometimes people think that they're engaging in something that is real life or happening in real time, but it's actually not, like they're deep fakes and all of those things that come into play. And I think for an industry like fashion, there's a lot of use cases that blockchain can assist when it comes down to helping the industry. But what I've observed is that fashion isn't ready to be transparent, because from a consumer perspective, if you really understood the margins on how much these apparel houses are charging for their goods, and you really knew what the real price was, you would stop buying, because it just doesn't make sense. And so there's a paywall that fashion wants to protect, because they want you to buy into the fantasy and to the allure of it. So I think that fashion will definitely have some pushback. I think that they're going to take the low hanging fruit and do, like, the VR, AR, the virtual skins, that's easy, right? But I think what's really critical for anyone thinking about how do I educate myself, get involved, I can tell you, I was at a conference, and there was someone who suggested that anyone who's thinking about from a technical analysis standpoint, you're a developer, learn Solidity. Solidity is going to be a key tool
Yeah.
to know as you're building on these systems. Yes, there's Rust, yes, there's Java, but Solidity is also important. So learn the language of the code, right? And this is coming from someone who's non-technical, right? So I'm hearing the things that people are talking about and the importance of it. So yes.
Perfect. You said a couple things and it just escaped me, but I do believe there's a lot of paywall. So one of the things outside of fashion is also the jewelry industry.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand the margin that's on diamonds, you would be surprised. Not you, but a lot of people would be surprised. So we have our next question coming up, and that's with Sam.
Good day, Miss Sharufa. Good day, Miss Tina. Hope you guys can hear me very well.
We
Ma'am,
can.
on the note of blockchain, right? How does this differ from buying regularly, or how does it improve the experience using cryptocurrencies in buying and selling assets as opposed to what we have been traditionally using all this time?
Okay, thanks so much for your question, Sam. I think one of the key things when we're talking about buying and selling, right, is the speed. And that's what blockchain offers us. It's so fast that no longer do we have to wait months, years to be able to purchase. We can purchase in minutes or hours at a time. And so I think that one of the biggest incentives is that the speed and then also the security, right? You being able to understand that there's a layer of security where someone cannot contest your ownership. It's irrefutable, meaning that once it's there, it's there. And this goes in a lot of ways. If you think about, and which this is just, a personal side where learning about these transactions, you kind of have to go through them to know exactly like what it does. And so there's been plenty of times where I've been burned or I've lost money, right? Because I'm purchasing, but I'm purchasing in the incorrect way. So you have to be very mindful, aware, and knowledgeable about how to be able to utilize the technology, because when it's gone, it's gone. There's not, you can't call up a bank and say, oops, my bad, I made a mistake, I need to get my money back. It's not happening. So it forces you to stay present in your transactions, to think about it, and to be able to be very knowledgeable and aware about what you're buying. You're not just aimlessly getting anything. So I think that I would say that those are the big things, the speed and the security of it.
Okay, ma'am. And then just another question, which I found really interesting. You had said that changing from the fashion to the crypto, you had to change a lot, especially like how you thought. What were the like what were the most challenging things that you had to unlearn from fashion moving into a new different industry?
Oh, wow, that's a great question, Sam. I would say something that I had to unlearn was the privilege that I had in the way that I was able to uh, protect my business. And what do I mean by that? With Janaki specifically, I, bootstrapped that company until I was able to lock in with an angel investor. And I never had to pitch. I never had to pitch the business. I locked in with her, and that was it. And so, what I had to unlearn was that in this new industry, oh, it's an industry full of pitching. You're constantly talking about what you're building in a multitude of ways. And in thinking about raising for the company as well, I had to think differently because it came so seamless to me before. And what my reality was as I'm going out, engaging with VCs, engaging with potential angels, the sell wasn't necessarily black and white, right? Because people were apprehensive about the technology because they didn't necessarily understand it. They were apprehensive about the market because they didn't understand Africa. And there were a lot of things that they were apprehensive about me because I'm a Black woman, talking about these things. So there were multiple stacks up against me, and I'm still navigating those things. So just full transparency, it doesn't mean that they've disappeared in any capacity. It's just meant that now I'm in a better space to be able to understand the rooms that I'm walking into. So I would say that's something that I've had to shift my mindset around.
All right, thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank
Uh,
you.
Perfect. And look, I think you're just laying out so many gems because oftentimes we think we have a great idea in a technology, and as long as we have that one pitch, then it's going to serve the various rooms that you go into, and it's like, no, know your audience and know how
Mm-hmm.
you have to hit every single time. Study who you're going to be speaking with and make adjustments to your story. So when you talked about the storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
it's critically important. Everyone thinks that that one note is going to be the selling note, and it's not. You have to understand who you're telling that story to and make those adjustments so that you can land that deal. So the next question is coming from Karen.
Karen is experiencing some glitching with her internet back home.
Okay, so here's her question. So I just want to make sure that we can get that because others that's going to be listening to it, they may have the same thing. Do you think
Okay.
NFTs and digital ownership will become a permanent part of the fashion landscape, or is it just a trend? Hmm.
So this NFT conversation is funny because I just heard someone talking about them yesterday at an event, and I said, "Are NFTs even relevant anymore?" So I think one of the things that people need to understand is that, there are a lot of buzzwords, there are a lot of hot ticket items within the industry of tech, right? But if you peel back like the names and look at the utility, it's the utility that's going to be sustainable and that will stay. Meaning that, NFTs being a non fungible token, if you look at what a digital deed is, it's essentially the same thing, right? Like it's a different name, right? It's a digital representation of the actual asset, of the signature of ownership, right? So I think that the utility isn't going anywhere. Will the names evolve or transform into something else? Possibly, because I think when we talk about mass adoption, there are going to be things that corporate entities are going to want to lock in because they're going to want to package and brand things a certain way to be able to create consumer confidence. And then I also think that
Mhm.
there are going to be a lot of things that everything doesn't have to look like a makeover. There are going to be things that are powered by blockchain that you as the user, you as the consumer, you'll have no idea. You won't even know. Like life will continue to keep going and you'll be on chain and it will just continue to, swipe and collect and do all of the things.
So much to unpack. And we are way over, but this is so good. And I know a lot of people they're going to just appreciate the level of detail that you're providing so they understand blockchain a lot better, how disruptive it can be, it will be, and how they can use to leverage it in their own careers or just within their life. Brandon, um, I think this would be the last question. Might be a couple other questions, and then we can wrap up.
Okay, no problem.
Good day, Miss Sharufa, and good day, Miss Tina. Just two
Mhm.
questions. First one, Miss Sharufa, as a woman moving from a creative industry into the tech space, did you face any particular challenges rather than just learning
Ooh,
the technical language that you mentioned?
that's a heavy question, Brandon. Thank you so much for that. You're absolutely right. My journey as a woman, and specifically a Black woman in this industry, has been very tumultuous. What I've learned and what I've realized is that the tech industry is very biased. It does not welcome women in the same way that it welcomes our male counterparts. And I think that when it comes down to a builder profile, there are things that are structured and supported specifically from a male patriarchal point of view and doesn't consider women at all. For example, I participated in a lot of hacker houses. And a hacker house, if anyone doesn't know, this is a place where people, builders, founders, developers come together to do a sprint. They lock in a place, whether it's a 3 day, a 5 day, and they just intensely work on their projects and their ideas around the clock, 24/7, nonstop. Well, when you arrive at these places, the majority of people in there, they're all men, specifically white men. And you rarely see women that are hackers, that are building in these environments. And what I've learned is that simple things to consider. There's not a place where if a woman was breastfeeding to be able to go and find a quiet nook to do so. There's not a consideration when it comes
Mm.
down to the multiple hats that women wear in terms of being nurturers and providers in their household. How do you leave your home to go hack and then go back? A lot of times men have the luxury of having their partner, having a woman at home, handling business, right? And they're able to like pursue their dreams in a way that as a woman, it's a little bit more tactical that you have to kind of like tap into to understand or to really craft out or build out, you know, a recipe that works for you. So what I would love to see is more diversification when it comes down to more women being ushered into the space, because I think that diversity of thought is needed. We bring a special, you know, je ne sais quoi to it. You know, there's so much power in having women on your team. And when you think about it from a statistical standpoint, it's already been documented that when you have diverse teams, when you include women, when you include women of color, you get bigger exits. Your business at the time of exiting, it's going to have a greater return. So if you're an investor investing in startups, investing in businesses, you want to make sure that it has a strong lineup of people who are reflective of the world in which we're building, because I think that that's very important, that we need to be in those rooms because we're building solutions for the world that looks like us and we're a part of it.
Can you just expand on that? Because a lot of people, they would just hear the sound bite and
Absolutely. It really boils down to diversification of thought, right?
yeah,
There are levels in terms of skills that I think that women naturally possess as far as being detail orientated, being able to multitask, being able to wear multiple hats at once, and continue to execute on all cylinders. You know, we're such a powerhouse, right? And so when you have teams that have women on them, you normally see bigger returns, meaning that if this company has been able to grow to scale to X, you know, X million, X amount, you know, whatever that is, normally when you peel back the layers on who's been working vigilantly on these projects, on these companies, having women in the room, having someone who's going to be able to take a 360 view of what you're building and recognize the white space, recognize the pain points that you're
mhm,
experiencing in a way that you're not able to see. And I
yeah,
think that it comes through the diversification of just like naturally what's innately in us, you know, being able to be a nurturer and a provider at the same time. You know, we wear there's so much duality that we wear within our day-to-day
yeah.
lives that allows it to be transferable in the context of business.
And I wanted you to be able to explain that because again, we live in the world of sound bites, and uh, just having that context is always.
Mm-hmm.
Brandon, I think you had a follow-up question.
I just wanted to ask, Ms. Sharifa, did you ever consider integrating blockchain into your fashion business, Janika, instead of moving out of the industry completely? And what led you to making a transition rather than just combining the two?
Yes, so I definitely consider that. I actually launched an NFT for my apparel company, Janaki, on OpenSea. So that was the beginning, right, of me being able to explore the utility. I definitely started with Janaki, but very quickly I realized that, okay, I wanted to create the NFT to archive my work, but I knew that what I was learning and discovering, I wanted to be able to go a little bit deeper, a little bit faster. So I didn't really put too much energy or resources behind it. But, you know, I did it, right? Like it was a part of my learnings.
Perfect. Any other last questions? Okay, fantastic. Sharufa, I can't thank you enough for wanting to come on and just to, I would say, just lay the tapestry of what a pivot looks like and your specific pivot. There's a lot of people out there that's very creative as well as technical. We have a lot of technology that's coming up today, and they're trying to figure out, how do I either merge the two? So, Brandon, thank you for that question, because I think a lot of people, they're trying to figure out, how do I merge, or do I do a complete pivot? But at every step along the way, there's things that you need to be able to weigh, that's going to give you the results that you're looking for. And you just displayed a very good example of what that looks like, not just from a market standpoint in the different market segments, technology as well as fashion, but also continentally. You're doing this within the United States, multiple places within the United States, and also on the continent of Africa. In addition to that, you walk the talk. And I think a lot of people, they have great ideas, but they haven't lived the experience. They haven't done their design of experiments on themselves with their products in which they are testing to make sure that they can walk any investor or any potential customer or client that want to utilize whatever the tools are that you have. So again, thank you. And thank you for, actually, I'm glad that we shifted it to today, because whenever we're talking about owning your story, owning your brand, as well as that pivot, that is your liberation. And what
Mhm.
perfect way for us to talk about this on Juneteenth here in the United States, which makes sense for us. And I know the people outside the US is going to be looking at that, at this, they'll probably say, well, what is Juneteenth? I want to implore you to go and to Google it and understand the liberation of not just the mind, but of the body, so that you can
Mhm.
participate, you can grow, and you own your story, you own your body, you own your own narrative. So with
Mhm.
that, I thank everyone for being able to tune in. And we've had quite a few conversations right now about technology, and we're going to continue. So to this month, we're discussing blockchain. Next month, I want you to join us and come back, because we're going to have a deeper conversation around LLM. So what is that? That is large language models. So we're going
Mhm.
to have a professor at the University of Stellenbosch. He's going to come on and really get into LLM 101. What do you need to know just about the technical platform itself, how it is impacting you every single day? Tune in for July, and we look forward to seeing you then. And again, Ms. Sharufa Walker, thank you for talking about your story and how you've pivot and how you're going to help other people to pivot along the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you, Tina, for the opportunity. Thank you to the community. Thank you to all of the listeners and the viewers. Um, and just know that we all have the power within us to be able to pivot and to be able to define who we are for ourselves. So, yes, happy Juneteenth.
Absolutely.